Welcome in to the Tuesday edition of the 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Blake Lovell is going to join us as sort of a silent partner at first. He'll jump in with some observations later in the podcast as we turn to basketball and football. But first, we will start with baseball. Barry Allen, how in the world do we get to 3 weeks left in the SEC regular season? It has flown by. I guess that proves the old adage, time flies when you're having fun.
A lot faster spring this year than last year, that's for sure.
Oh, yes.
You're trying to track all these college baseball games, SEC, primarily for us, but I still keep up, and you still keep up nationally with things that are going on because that's storylines. But it has really gone by fast. I was in the stadium Sunday watching Alabama and Missouri, and I'm like, man, they got 10 games left, and that's it. 10 regular season games, and I said some teams are down to 9 regular season games. So that's a really fast year. I mean, it seems like just last week we were talking about snow on the ground and starting baseball, and now we're, what are we, 3 weeks today from the start of the SEC tournament in Hoover? So it has really moved along.
Well, and I'll tell you one more thing that makes everything feel more normal. Vandy and Louisville play today. You flash back to the end of 2019, and those two teams play in Omaha, and it's maybe the best team Louisville's ever had, and the Cardinals are leading heading into the ninth inning, and Vanderbilt gets a comeback, scores a couple runs, and beats them in the infamous Luke Smith game. So that one going on today in Louisville, that one's been moved up from 7 Central to 3 because of rain there. But that'll be a fun little thing to entertain us in the midweek, I think.
Yeah, it will. There's some decent national midweek games, today, but that certainly is one that, grabs your attention. Vanderbilt and Louisville, just it is what it is, but two doormat programs in college baseball for many, many, many years. And then all of a sudden, Tim Corbin and Dan McDonnell comes onto the scene, and, they become overnight the 1927 Yankees. And both of them, I mean, they have zero history before either of these two coaches got to campus. I mean, Vanderbilt had a couple of SEC championships and maybe 1 or 2 NCAA appearances. Louisville had a little bit of a run with Lilo Prado in some of the Metro Conference days, but by and large, Louisville and Vanderbilt were everybody's baseball homecoming opponents, and everybody wanted to play them, and they were terrible, and they had terrible facilities, and all of a sudden, Tim Corbin and Dan McDonnell comes onto the scene, and they battled in Omaha, they battled in super regionals. I mean, Louisville won an epic super regional in Nashville a few years ago. I was there, packed house, electric atmosphere. I mean, just unbelievable tension in the series. And I think Louisville swept them in 2 games to go to Omaha. Vanderbilt's won 2 national championships. The last time Vanderbilt was in Omaha, I think they got yelled at on the mound by a Louisville pitcher after he struck out 2 batters to end an inning. And I'm like, yeah, you probably don't want to do that. And then Vanderbilt won the game in the bottom. I think it was the bottom of the 8th, and ended up winning and going on to win the national championship the last time we actually had a season in a World Series. So these two teams are really, really good teams under their current head coaches, and it's phenomenal at what they've been able to accomplish in a we say a short time, but 10, 12, 15 years is a short time compared to 125. The first 100 years of that or so, they were non-existent in college baseball. And it'll be a fun game to watch this afternoon. It'll be a high intensity, lots of drama, and guys that played together in high school and summer ball, and it'll be a really, really good matchup this afternoon.
Yeah, I was actually at the 2013 series in Nashville. That was the year Vanderbilt went 26-3 and set an SEC record for wins in the regular season in the SEC. I don't think that'll ever be topped, but stopped 1 game short of Omaha, or really 2 games, because I think Louisville swept that series. So there was that, and I was also in Omaha for the infamous Luke Smith game, which I remember seeing that commotion. I was in the press box And I'm like, that is not the team that you kind of want to mess with. And sure enough, Vanderbilt came out guns a-blazing in the top of the next inning and just stunned Louisville, and Luke Smith became a meme and all that. But this is just such a fun series. And frankly, I mean, I think it's written in the NCAA tournament bylaws that these two teams have to face each other in the tournament. I'm starting to wonder, I don't know that Louisville can do enough between now and the start of the tournament to earn a host at this point. So you could see the Cardinals back in Nashville for a regional.
You certainly could. Yeah, I'm not sure that they can do enough to host it, in Louisville. They've been a tremendous host for years and have had some really good teams, but I don't know that this year that there's quite enough there for them to, crack that top 16. I mean, obviously they're going to be in, but yeah, I could see. And I think listening to the analysts that are on the SEC network and the ACC network and college baseball guys who, you listen to their things and how they talk, it sounds to me like a lot of them are for opening up the door and tossing the RPI out into the yard and not worrying about it. That's how I think some of the analysts feel. And I think a lot of them feel like that these regionals this year are really going to be regionals. Kind of like, 2001 when we had the 9/11 attacks in the fall, tragic day in September. And I think that year, because of air travel and just because of things in general, they tried to keep as many teams on a bus as they could. And I was still at Alabama at the time. And our number 2 seed in our regional was Auburn, which was unheard of and which frankly made us really mad that Auburn was coming here. And Auburn was even madder because they were coming here. And that's all anybody talked about was Alabama and Auburn playing Saturday night in the undefeated game. Well, guess what? Southeast Missouri beat Alabama, and Florida Atlantic beat Auburn. And Alabama and Auburn played at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning in a loser leave town game. And fortunately, when I was at Alabama, they were the loser that left town. And Alabama bounced all the way back and lost to FAU in the championship game, the IF game, and ended up FAU going to play Georgia Tech in the Super Regional that year. But they regionalized those a lot in that year. And I'm thinking that's how that's going to happen this year. And it's not anything unusual to see Vanderbilt and Louisville play in a regional, just like it's not unusual to see Florida, Florida State, and Miami in a regional. I don't think all three of them will be in the same regional, but I certainly think that Florida and Miami or Florida and Florida State could be paired up in a regional too. That has happened before. Certainly in Tallahassee one year, Florida State was the 1 and Florida was the 2. And guess what? Brown beat Florida State, and I forget who beat Florida, and Florida State played the go-home game the first day on Saturday, and that was like 2010. So it's happened before. I could see this being a really regionalized regionals this year. So Louisville going to Vanderbilt would make a lot of sense. Southern Miss going to Mississippi State or Ole Miss would make a lot of sense. I don't think they'll match up conference teams like they have in the past. They could, but I don't think they will. But you're very right. Vanderbilt could be the 1 and Louisville could be the 2, and that'd be a really tough regional in Nashville.
Well, that would be a really reactionary NCAA thing to do. And frankly, if some people I don't think want a bunch of SEC teams getting to Omaha. I'm not saying that's what the NCAA wants, but if you want to try to do that under the guise of balance or whatever, here's the problem this year. The nation is usually pretty Southeastern heavy when it comes to the balance of power. I think it's even more that case this year. I just think I've always not understood, as much money as the NCAA has, if you want to preserve the integrity of your championships, do an S-curve. Seed the best 1 with the worst 2 and the best 3 and the worst 4, and that would be the way to do it. And you start mixing with that like they used to do and trying to keep teams closer to home. I always felt Mississippi State was a team that I would look at their draw every year and think, man, the NCAA really screwed them. And I just don't want to see. I feel like the NCAA has sort of gone back to, I guess, an attitude of parity with these things and recognize that this is a major sport. I would hate to see them take a step back. And of course, they've got all the built in excuses this year if they do.
They do. And I'd be interested to see, how they do this. One, we're going to get this Sunday, I think, or Monday. We're going to get the 20 or so host sites. They originally said 16. Now they're going to do 20 or so and then pick from those the 16 who are going to host. So we're going to have a pretty good idea who's going to host come next Monday. I understand 40, 50 schools submitted bids. And you mentioned Mississippi State. You're talking about them. You always talk about them, they getting screwed in the deal. Well, the last time they hosted in Starkville, they drew Southern as the 4, but their 2 and 3 were Miami and Central Michigan. And Miami's a brand now. This is a Miami team that's won some national championships, and they're the only number 1 seed since we started this in 1999 to win the national championship in Omaha. They were the 1 seed. They're the only one to ever do it. Hadn't been done since. And they've won several national championships with a lot of really good players. And then you had a Central Michigan team coming to Starkville that year. Oh, by the way, they won 19 in a row. And they bludgeoned several Power 5 teams that year. I mean, just bludgeoned them. And so they were rolling in, and then they upset Miami. I don't think they upset Miami. I thought they were better than Miami that year, to be honest with you. And they won the game. And they're playing Mississippi State on a Saturday night in Starkville. And it was a little overwhelming for the Chippewas, I'll say that. Mississippi State was better than everybody. But yeah, I mean, those are 2 hard games for them. I mean, they get, and then Ole Miss that same season, they're the 1 and their 4 seed is Jacksonville State. And they'd won 17 in a row going to Oxford. So both of those Mississippi schools had some really hard draws in their tournament. But I would be interesting to see what they do. I'd also like to wish there'd be some way you could get into their heads or maybe talk to somebody on the committee and try to find out what they're thinking, what their thought process is, who they're looking at. But if you look at the Warren Nolan top 10 this morning, Arkansas's 1, Mississippi State's 2, TCU's 3, Vanderbilt's 4. I think they're all a national seed. Fairfield is 5. They got no chance to host. Texas is 6, Tennessee's 7, Arizona's 8, Ole Miss is 9, and Notre Dame is 10. If Notre Dame wins the ACC, Notre Dame's going to host. Notre Dame will very likely be a national seed. Notre Dame will host, and they need that in the Midwest. You need that draw for some of those teams. Now, all of a sudden, the right states, if you want to really keep them regional, now the Horizon and the MAC and those teams can all go to Notre Dame, and you're basically giving Notre Dame a chance to be in the super regional and perhaps maybe get to Omaha, and perhaps they are good enough. I mean, they're 24 and 8 overall. They're 21 and 8 in the league. They are easily going to win the ACC unless something crazy happens, and I could see Notre Dame easily being a national seed and hosting a regional and a super regional as we get closer to this. Fairfield finally lost the other day, so they're 28 and 1. They're not going to host, obviously, but they're going to be an interesting placement somewhere, even though they're 5 in the RPI. I do not think there is one team in the top 10 that Fairfield could beat, but they're a nice story, and I think they'd be fun in the tournament somewhere. And then you continue looking, South Carolina's 15 in the RPI, and this is interesting for LSU and Alabama. They're in the top 30. LSU's 24, Alabama's 27, Florida's 29. I mean, they're like the 8th or 9th best SEC team in terms of RPI. And then Georgia's 39. So you got 10 teams from the SEC in the top 39 in the RPI. So these next 3 weekends are going to be really, really interesting, and get some kind of an idea, I guess, Monday I guess we'll know maybe some teams that are in, because if they're saying that this team has a chance to host, you're only going to host if you're getting in. So that may give us some idea that, well, they think these 20 teams are going to get in, and that may give us a little more clarity.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking at warrennolan.com right now. He does a great job with the RPI. And one thing that I like about it is his will usually update within 5 minutes of the completion of a game instead of having to wait till the next day. But he also does a thing if you go to the RPI and you go to, I think it is the RPI team sheets or something like that, they put them all right there together. I'm looking right now two teams that I think are almost slam dunks to be national seeds, and maybe the only two at this point. I think you've got some others that would be there right now, but Arkansas and Vanderbilt. You look at who they beat. Arkansas has got the best resume in the country. It has taken a series 3-0 to Mississippi State. It's taken 2 or 3 from Ole Miss, 2 or 3 from South Carolina. All those are teams that I think would be hosting today. Took 2 or 3 against Louisiana Tech. Tech might be a host team. 2 out of 3 against LSU. I don't know that LSU should be in at this point, but that's a team we'll talk about later. The RPI is high. The schedule's been brutal. And 2 or 3 against Alabama, which I think would be a regional team right now. I don't know that anybody's got the resume. Then you look at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt took 2 or 3 against Mississippi State, 2 or 3 at Tennessee, 2 or 3 against South Carolina at home, 2-0 against Wright State, which is not the 17th best team in the country, but it is 17 in the RPI. I guess that counts for something. 2 or 3 at Oklahoma State, which I think will be a regional team, although the Cowboys need to start winning some Big 12 games here pretty soon. 2 or 3 at LSU, and then, of course, they lose the series to Florida and Georgia. But right now, both those regional teams, I think those two teams – best resumes, I think a couple of steps above the rest. TCU was higher than Vanderbilt in the RPI, but it lost 2 or 3 in that run against 3 SEC teams to start the season. It lost 2 or 3 to Texas Tech. It did sweep Oklahoma State, but it lost 2 or 3 to Gonzaga. Those are the top series it's played. TCU has done its damage against teams that aren't going to be in the field or are borderline in the field. So to me, Vanderbilt clearly better than TCU right now. And of course, Arkansas easily better than TCU, which Arkansas, of course, had a head-to-head win against the Horned Frogs. You go down, I think your comment on Fairfield is fair. I don't think that's anywhere near a top-level team. Texas is a team that's going to be in the conversation for a national seed, but the Longhorns lost all 3 games against the SEC in that weekend opening thing to start the season. 2 or 3 losses against Texas Tech. Did sweep South Carolina at home. Did take 2 or 3 from Oklahoma State. So a good resume, but again, nowhere near, I don't think, Vanderbilt or Arkansas. Then you drop down to Tennessee. I think the Vols have a chance to be a national seed, but lost 2 or 3 to Vandy in their best series at home. Lost 2 or 4 to Indiana State. Once you go down the line, it starts getting better, but the Vols don't have the marquee wins at the very top that you'd maybe think, given how good that team is. You go down Arizona 8 in the RPI this morning, took 2 or 3 against Oregon, split a 2-game series with Air Force, and then the rest of their wins are against teams that are good, maybe NIT level teams. If this were basketball, and some teams like UCLA and Arizona State that I think would probably get in, but not be in pretty strong. And then you've got Ole Miss, which is about to make it really interesting. Now, Ole Miss is starting from behind a little bit because it lost series 2-1 against Mississippi State and Arkansas, but got wins against TCU, Texas, and Texas Tech in that first weekend. It just swept South Carolina. The Rebels are going to have a chance against Vanderbilt in a couple of weeks. Suddenly they're playing better. Vanderbilt's pitching is starting to struggle. I think that, Ole Miss a week ago, Barry, probably wasn't hosting. But I think now with what it did against South Carolina, it's easily hosting if you pick the field today, and now really putting itself with all those quality wins really close to that national seed line.
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, I think it was a huge series win for them this past weekend against South Carolina. They stopped a 4-series losing streak. And, they've done all that without Tim Elko. And, he pinch hit Saturday night. And he popped up to the shortstop, and he just got under the ball. That place got a lot of electricity when he came out of the dugout and was standing on deck. I saw him coming out of the dugout, and I'm like, oh my God, it's Kirk Gibson. I said, he's going to hit a home run. I thought, well, we'll win the game because they were already ahead. But he comes strolling to the plate, and they interviewed him on the SEC Network Sunday night in their Rally Cap show. And he said, I had goosebumps. He goes, I mean, like, people are cheering. I'm like, oh, chill out. I don't even know if I swing this bat or not. They're going like crazy. He goes, he said, I got in the box and I had to get out for a minute just because I was just so overwhelmed. He goes, our fans were just crazy. I don't know that he could DH and play every day, but, somebody like that could come off the bench and help them a little bit later in the season. I think he can, I think that'll help them. And I think they certainly put themselves back in the position to host and be a national seed. I mean, if they can win the series with Vanderbilt, I mean, Ole Miss is 15-8 in quad 1 games. They don't have any quad 2 wins, and they're 17-1 quad 3 and 4. You're talking about Arkansas and Vanderbilt making I'm sorry, that was Vanderbilt's record. I'm sorry, that wasn't Ole Miss.
Well, let's see. Let's go down quad 1 records. Arkansas 16-5, Mississippi State 11-8, TCU 12-6. But again, a lot of that against the bottom half of that. Vanderbilt 15-8, Fairfield 4-0, Texas 8-7, Tennessee 14-9, Arizona 7-5, Ole Miss 13-9. So the Rebels are getting right up there. By the way, Notre Dame 12-3. But again, you look at Notre Dame's resume, and I know that the ACC is funny this year, but again, not against national seed type teams in terms of where Notre Dame's wins are coming. Now you go down a little bit, Oregon and Texas Tech, I think could crash the party too. But again, I just think as I look at it and who these teams have beaten, Ole Miss is in really good position just by taking care of business.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned TCU and Texas. They play each other this weekend at Lupton Stadium in Fort Worth. And I think 2 of those games are going to be televised. You talk about TCU. I mean, they've got 23 quad 1 and quad 2 wins. They're 23-8. Arkansas is, 24-8. Texas, when you look at those quad 1 and quad 2 wins, Texas is just 15-9, and Vanderbilt is 15-8 with no quad 2 wins. I mean, there's no question that Arkansas and Vanderbilt are the best teams in this league, and there's no question that they're the best teams among the best teams in the country. That they're a cinch to host and be a national seed. I would also put Mississippi State in there, just based on they're 32-10, 14-7 in the league. I know they got swept at home by Arkansas and they lost 2 out of 3 at Vanderbilt, but they're 7 SEC losses. They lost to 3 to Arkansas, 2 to Vanderbilt, 1 to Ole Miss. That's 6 of their 7, and LSU beat them in Baton Rouge in the other one, which is not, in a normal year, that's like, well, your 7 losses came against those teams. They probably wish they had that LSU game back, but, LSU's tough to sweep at home, even in a bad year for LSU. So their 7 losses are pretty, against the good quality teams. They've beaten everybody else. I mean, they've swept Kentucky, they swept Auburn, they swept Texas A&M. I mean, they're 9-0 in those games, and they play. Their last 3 weekends are at South Carolina. This weekend will be very tough. On the road, South Carolina with 2 straight series losses. Kind of got to get a little redemption. Then they got Missouri at home, and then at Alabama. Their last 3 opponents are 27-36, and I think they're. I think they're, if not already, in that mix for a national seed and be there. They're going to get there pretty soon. I know the Missouri is not going to help them. They're the worst team in the league, and then like the 140s, I think, in the RPI. Alabama's certainly one of those top 25, top 30 RPI teams, and South Carolina is as well. So they got a chance to really help themselves. They're 22-9 in quad 1 and quad 2 games. I mean, 11-8 quad 1 and 11-1 in quad 2, and then 10-1 in the quad 4, and that's a lot of SWACs and those midweek games they've played in the Kent States and people like that. But I think they're certainly in that mix with Arkansas and Vanderbilt, and they're still not out of winning the SEC yet either. I mean, Arkansas's schedule is brutal. 37-26 is their combined record with Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. and Vanderbilt still plays Alabama, Ole Miss, and Kentucky, who are 34 and 29. I think that Ole Miss trip to Oxford next week is going to be really hard for them. I do think they'll handle Alabama and Kentucky. I could see them winning 5 of those, possibly all 6. So that Ole Miss series is going to be a real key for them next week. And then, Tennessee's still in the mix too, with Missouri, Arkansas, and at South Carolina. Their last 3 teams are 34 and 32, I believe that is 31 and 32 are their combined records. So there's still a lot of play left. But I would put Mississippi State kind of in that same boat with Arkansas and Vanderbilt, I think, right now. And certainly looking at their schedule and the way they've played, that they're definitely in that conversation as a national seed right now.
Okay, I'm going to just give you some top-end comparisons, and this is why I think Vanderbilt and Arkansas really stand out right now. This is marks against different tiers of the RPI. Arkansas 8-1 against the top 10. Vanderbilt 4-2. Mississippi State 4-7. Against the top 25, Arkansas and Vanderbilt both 13-4. Mississippi State 8-8. Against the top 25, Ole Miss 4-4. 9-7. Ole Miss 9-7 against the top 25. 4-4 against the top 10. And let me just throw in our Notre Dame Arizona comparisons. Notre Dame has not played a game against an RPI top 10 team. It is 2-1 against the top 25. Both of those coming against number 21 Pitt. Arizona 2-1 against the top 10. And 2-1 against the top 25. It's only played 3 games. So I think when you start comparing the SEC, you're going to find, and I'll break Tennessee down in a minute too, but they're more in the Mississippi State category than the Vanderbilt and Arkansas. I just think those 2 teams in terms of resume are kind of leaving the rest of the country behind right now. Texas, here's one. Okay. Texas is 0-3 against the top 25 and 6-6. I'm sorry, 6-6 against the top 25 and 0-3 against the top 10. When you start really comparing, are they beating the elite type teams? I just think Arkansas and Vanderbilt are starting to lap the field here. And I think that Ole Miss, again, I think really has a chance to move into that territory because it banks some really good wins. And you mentioned the injury situation. Ole Miss has been without key pitchers a lot of the year. And I think the tournament committee is going to talk about that too.
Oh, no doubt on that. They've lost, Hoglin's been out, Nikhazy's been out, Schottenjay's missed a ton of games, Elko's been out. So I certainly think, that'll play into the part for Ole Miss. And, the fact that they've played well this weekend against a good team at home, and they've, got some opportunities in front of them. The one thing with me for Arkansas that stands out is, that I've thought for a couple of weeks now, they're the best team in this league. And probably the best team in this country. Well, not probably, they are, if they're the best team in this league. They've beaten Texas Tech, Texas, TCU. They have 2 wins and a loss to Louisiana Tech, 3-0 against Mississippi State, 2-1 against Ole Miss, 2-1 against South Carolina, and 2-1 against LSU. You know what the common denominator in all of those games are, Chris?
I give up.
Ain't not one of them been in Fayetteville.
Oh, my goodness.
Every one of those games were away from Baum Stadium. I know I hope he got ice cream for not saying ain't one time. I know that's bad grammar, but every one of those games that I just read you off their records, all of those games were played on the road or at a neutral site.
Well, when's the last time you saw a team in May winning 89% of its games against top 10 RPI teams? I mean, that's absurd.
You probably have to go back to, maybe Vanderbilt a few in 13 or Alabama and LSU when they had some really good teams in the 90s. LSU, could be, roll off some juggernaut teams. I mean, I remember in 1999 when I was still at Alabama, Alabama won 21 games in the SEC that year. They didn't win the division because Arkansas won 22 and won the SEC. And South Carolina won the East at 15-15. And that was your best team over in the East. They were 7 games worse than Arkansas and 6 games worse than Alabama. And that's not that'll never happen again, where you have all these two teams probably in the same division with 43 wins, and one of them didn't even win the division. So,
well, here's another thing, Barry. I'm looking at those top 10 wins that Arkansas has. One of them was that crazy 18-14 game where I think Arkansas was up 14-1 or whatever it was. It might not have been that bad, and Ole Miss makes a rally. But the only loss in this was that 13-6 loss on April the 10th to Ole Miss. Again, that was on the road. But as you said, all these games, all but two, yeah, they're all away from home. That's crazy.
And their other loss was 2-0 on a Sunday at Louisiana Tech, where they'd beaten them 17-8 the first 2 days.
I mean, that's almost insurmountable as a national seed. I mean, Vanderbilt, I think, would have a chance. Ole Miss might have a chance, but I don't know, unless Arkansas just collapses. If they just go 2-1 in the rest of the series, which they're perfectly capable of doing, or even going 5-4 over the last 9. I just don't see how you can budge them out of maybe 1 or 2. I think somebody else would have to do an awful lot of stuff. But here's another thing. That I look at how teams win, right? And if you're winning a lot of one-run games, and that's why I've said for a long time, Auburn is due to get better. Because when you're losing a lot of one-run games to good teams, that tells me you're right there with good teams. And so, therefore, you're better than your record, and your luck is bound to turn. Arkansas, in these games against top 10 teams, none of them have been one-run wins. Now, a couple of them have been, I say a couple, one to be exact, was by 2 runs. Everything else by 3 runs or more. So not only is Arkansas winning those games, it is winning those games decisively, Barry.
Yeah, they are. I mean, you look at Tech, they won, they were behind against Texas Tech in the opener, came back, won 13-9, shut out Texas 4-0, 4-1 over TCU. The Mississippi State wins are +6, +6, and +2. The wins over Ole Miss are +4, +4. That game they're up 11-0, ends up winning 18-14. They go to South Carolina, they're +5, +4. I mean, they're just, and they have 2 games that were canceled one for weather with Grambling, which wouldn't help or hurt them in either way. But they also lost a midweek game last week to Missouri State for Missouri State having COVID. They're 14-15. Missouri State is. I don't know that would have helped them, but I don't know that they need any help at all. I mean, they've got Georgia, Arkansas State, Tennessee, and Florida left. They're 10 games. They went 9-1. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I would not be shocked. Certainly wouldn't be shocked if they were, 7-3, 8-2 in those games. I think probably at minimum they'd be 7-3 because I just think they're really good. I think their offense is really good. It's been really good all year long. Christian Franklin is certainly making his case to be the SEC Player of the Year, and some people say, well, he's not even on the best player on their team. But, I mean, he just does everything when you need him to do it. I mean, he single-handedly beat LSU Friday night with 5 RBI, 2-run single in the 7th after they were no-hit for 6+ innings, 3-run homer in the 8th. Oh, and he threw Gavin Dugas out by like 12 miles going to third base trying to go first to third on a single to center field. So he gets an outfield assist. He had 10 RBI in the series this weekend, almost brought him back Saturday night in game 2, and they would have swept if they could have gotten the guy on base. He was up next, and he did have a 2-run single in that game. And I think he was on deck when the last out was made. But this has just been a complete offense. And now with Wicklander and Peyton Pallette taking over on the mound and really dominating in starts, and then our guy Kevin Kopps, I think the guy's still allowed a hit or a base runner in so many innings. I mean, it's just phenomenal to have that guy in the back end of your pen, and they've worked their pitching staff together where they've gotten enough now, and they've developed, and I think they're very elite, and now their pitching staff has joined their offense, and I think it's going to be hard to beat them. I think it's going to be hard to overtake them, even though they have a 1-game lead, over both Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. But you're talking about if you just say if Arkansas went 6-3, that means Vanderbilt's got to go 7-2, and State's got to go 7-2. And that's hard. I mean, that's hard. I mean, you're saying, well, that doesn't sound that hard because they got Missouri, but if they go 7-2, then those two teams got to go 8-1. And then you're getting unrealistic. If Arkansas goes 8-1, have somebody try to go 9-0, that's just, it's unrealistic to try to think that somebody's going to win there because, just at some point you're going to go, and just make a bad play, have something just not hit that day. But Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. And one thing interesting, I meant to try to have this looked up for today. I know since 2012, Arkansas has been on the road every year to end the regular season. They are home this year against Florida the last weekend of the season, and they've always gone from the road game to Hoover and been on the road for like 10, 12 days at a time. They've never won the SEC tournament in Hoover or anywhere. They've been in the finals a couple of times, lost to Alabama in 99, lost to LSU a couple of years ago, lost to Auburn in 98. They were in the finals back-to-back years in 98 and 99. They've never won the tournament. Georgia's never won it. Kentucky's never won it. And obviously Missouri. Those are the only four teams that's never won the SEC tournament. And I think a lot of that for Arkansas is the fact that they've always closed the regular season on the road. They don't do that this year. They close at home. And they may be one of those teams that's primed this year to be that team that wins the regular season and wins the tournament. I'm not saying they're going to win the tournament right now. We'll get into that in 3 weeks when we see the brackets and different things. But this is a really good team. They are the number one RPI team in the country for a reason. And I think a lot of that is because they have such a good offense, their pitching has developed, but it also with the fact of all those teams that I read out that they've beaten those teams on the road. That says a lot for them. And they go to Tennessee next week, and I don't think they weren't intimidated in Columbia 2 weeks ago, and I don't think they'll be intimidated in Knoxville next week either.
Well, I've taken some heat for some Arkansas fans for not having some of the hitters higher in the power rankings, but here's been my point all along, and this is going to illustrate it. I run offensive production through a little formula. It spits out like how many runs, given your stat line, you would expect to create per 27 outs. And, usually once you're a hitter and you're over 9, that gets you in our top 14, depending on what you do in the conference. And here is what Arkansas has done. This is what sets this lineup apart. This is based on a Bill James formula. It's estimates of runs created per 27 outs. So there's an adjustment I can make that adjusts it to actual runs scored that I haven't done. These are just the raw totals. Matt Goodhart, 9.5. Christian Franklin, 8.4. Zach Gregory, 8.4. Robert Moore, 7.7. Cullen Smith, 7.4. Brady Slavin, 7.4. Caden Wallace, 6.9. Jalen Battles, 5.1. Casey Opitz, 5.0. The difference between Arkansas and the other teams is once you start getting down to a team's 4th, 5th, 6th best hitter, those other teams, their guys are producing at the level that Arkansas's guys that are like 7, 8, and 9 are producing. Arkansas has got really good hitters at the top, but what makes them different, and I think this probably applies somewhat to Tennessee, I would have to take a look at it, but what makes them different is their lineup is so balanced, and frankly, I would be more fearful of pitching to a team like Arkansas than I would a team, say LSU, where you've got Trey Morgan and Dylan Cruz, who have produced better by this than anybody Arkansas has got. But you start getting down the middle of that order, and it drops off quickly. That is what makes Arkansas special. It is not that they've got the absolute superstar player of the year guys at the top. I mean, you could make an argument maybe for some of those guys by the time this is over. But what makes them special is nobody has got the depth like they've got. And that's hard to pitch to because there's no break anywhere in that lineup, Barry.
Yeah, I like their lineup too. I've liked it, from the start. I mean, you got Robert Moore, Matt Goodhart, Caden Wallace, Christian Franklin, Brady Slavins. I mean, a lot of power. They got 4 guys with double-digit home runs. But even the guys, 6 through 9, including Battles and some of their others in their lineup. This is a good lineup. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a junior college coach, in Tuscaloosa last week, a couple of weeks ago, but just analytics and stats, and he's not really into all that. He goes, I just believe you put your best 9 hitters in the lineup, and they can't walk somebody, they can't pitch around somebody. If you put your top 4 guys there, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 can't hit, then your 1 through 4 hitters are never going to get a chance to swing the bat, and they're going, pitch them tougher and pitch around them. If you got first base open, you clean up hitters up, they're going to walk him. And then if your 5-hole hitter can't hit, then your inning's over, and you run into a lot of outs and kill a lot of innings. And Arkansas doesn't do that. And I think their lineup is really good, and I think it's really solid, and it has been since day one. And now the pitching staff is catching up, and it's making them a really dangerous team.
Yeah, and the other thing about that, I look at their lineup, and like Casey Opitz is not hitting like he can. And I'm looking up and down, like batting average on balls in play is a dead giveaway. If a guy's hitting, 450 or something this late in the year, that means there's probably some luck involved. I'm looking at the batting averages on balls in play for all these guys. And of course, I've seen a lot of these kids before, and I know they can hit. Like Robert Moore, a kid who kind of got off to a slow start, was a preseason All-American by some. He's really hitting out. That's the thing about Arkansas. Not only are they deep, I don't really see anything flukish about what they're doing, Barry. I mean, sometimes a lineup can get a hot start, and you can say, well, this guy's due to come down, this guy's due to come down. These guys really aren't as good as their numbers might suggest they are. I don't see it with that. I don't see that with these guys. I think these guys are all legit. And I think, again, you got guys like that, Opitz and Moore, that haven't hit at times like they're capable. They're just scary.
Yeah, Moore's pretty electric. He's hit for the cycle. He's hit a couple. He's hit a walk-off, well, not a walk-off home run, but an extra inning home run at Louisiana Tech to kind of move them along. And he's been at the top of the order. He's hit at the bottom of the order. I mean, just a dangerous hitter. You look at some of their numbers. Goodhart, Matt Goodhart in SEC play. Overall, he's hitting 321. In SEC play, he's hitting 284. That's not that big of a drop off. Caden Wallace, you look at him, a 306 hitter, but in SEC play, he's hitting 337. That's 7 extra base hits. Slavens is hitting 305 in the league. Christian Franklin, 286 in the league. Slavens is 311 overall. Franklin, 303 overall. So Moore at 296. But you look at, Goodhart with 11 homers, Robert Moore with 11 homers, Brady Slavens with 10, Christian Franklin with 10, Caden Wallace with 9, Charlie Welch, who's, only played in 13 games and battled some injuries. He has 5 home runs. Cullen Smith has 6 home runs. So they have a lot of guys, can hit. They have a lot of guys. They have 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 guys with a home run. And they have 76 in 42 games. So they hit for average, they hit for power. They have 62 doubles, 10 triples, and 76 home runs. So they've got more home runs than they have doubles and triples for the year, and almost 400 hits, and they've scored 347 runs, in the course of their season. And you look at SEC play, they've got 30 homers and 29 doubles and triples. So still more home runs than doubles and triples. And you got 6 from Goodhart, 6 from Franklin, and 5 from Robert Moore, and 3 homers from Wallace, and 2 from Slavens, and 3 from Cullen Smith. So the usual suspects, overall, and in the SEC, just a good, consistent lineup. And, they may not have that one guy that jumps out there and is leading the league in every category, but they've got 7 or 8, that are good. You look at, you talk about Opitz hadn't hit much at 217 in the conference. And, you look at him overall, he's hitting 256, but, the guys, played well behind the plate and done a good job calling the game for them. And I think that's where they need him the most is, just on his defense and, his occasional, hitting, his occasional power. He's just hit the 1 home run overall, but, just a good lineup up and down 1 through 9, and a very tough to navigate for a pitcher. You saw that the other night. Landon Marceau, kind of cruised through the first 6 innings. His team's got no hits, and then he gets to the 7th, and then all of a sudden, becomes a different story because they're good hitters. They adjust. He's trying to adjust, but they adjust, and he gives up a hit, and he ends up giving up 2 runs, and then they end up scoring 7. He ends up going from a no-hitter in the 7th to losing the game 7-0, and that's how they can adjust, and that's why they're good.
Well, I was going to say, you hit one of the two things that if I'm a pitcher, I don't want to see. That's a guy who can either pop the ball out of the park or in the gap. And when you're basically your whole lineup can do that, that's tough to pitch to. The other thing is walk rates, because I'm thinking if I'm a pitcher and I can get you to chase something out of the zone, then maybe I can get away with some things and get you out. Walk rates for this team: Goodhart 16%, Franklin 14%. Gregory 17, Moore 15, Cullen Smith 20, Wallace 11. Then you got guys, Nesbitt walks 15, Opitz is 17. So you look up and down this lineup, all these guys take walks too. And again, Tennessee, I want to get to the Vols in just a minute, and we'll probably hit a couple other topics outside of baseball and close the show. But those are the two teams in this league that are really scary to pitch to right now. Not that there aren't some others, but just that combo of power and pretty good to high walk rates. That just, again, hard to catch a break pitching to those guys.
Yeah, you look at Arkansas, you talk about those rates. They have 12 guys with double-figure walks, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys with 20 or more walks, and that's just hard to navigate. And then you look at Tennessee's the same way. You look at them and how they are. They walk a lot, and their pitchers don't walk a lot. I mean, Tennessee's a hard team to pitch to. I mean, go ask our friend Dylan Smith at Alabama, who threw 4 shutout innings against the Vols, but had to be lifted from the game because his pitch count in the 4th inning was 98. In 4 innings. I mean, that's almost 25 pitches an inning.
And if I can interrupt you, Smith's a strike thrower too.
He is, and that's how patient Tennessee is at the plate. You got Liam Spence with 39 walks and Max Ferguson with 36, and then a ton of guys with 20. Rutgers got 20, Durkee's got 21, and Lipsius has got 24, and then they're in the same, not quite as many 20 walks as Arkansas does, but they'll take pitches on you now. Liam Spence will take a bunch of pitches and drive that pitch count up, and that's what his job is as a leadoff hitter, is to take those pitches and let his team see what this other guy has. And you're right, Dylan Smith was a strike thrower, and he threw 4 shutout innings, and he comes out because he's thrown 98 pitches, because it seemed like every batter in the game was 3-2, and it seemed like every other batter was fouling off 1 or 2 or 3 2-strike pitches, just keeping the at bats alive, and that's what Tennessee does. They walked 246 times as a team, and their pitching staff has walked only 117. And they were a team that just pounds the strike zone, with regularity, and their lineup is good. They've hit 5 grand slams, which is the most of any team in the league, and you've got Liam Spence at 384 and Rucker at 333. They only have 1 double-figure home run guy, and that's our friend Evan Russell, who's hit 6 of those in 2 games and had another 2 homer games. So he's got 8 of his 12 home runs have come in 3 games, but 10 of them in the SEC, which means he's, showing up in the clutch games and hitting the big home runs in the games that matter, not piling up a bunch of numbers in the midweek. He's got 12 homers. Beck's got 9, but he's got 11 doubles, and Rucker has 7 homers, but he's got 13 doubles. So they 20, 40, 55 extra base hits out of those 3 guys right there. And they also walk, and they walk a lot. Rucker's got 20 walks, Beck's got 15, and Russell's got 19. So, almost 50 walks and 50 extra base hits out of those 3 guys. And that makes a really dangerous lineup for Tennessee.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at it, but not surprisingly, Arkansas, Tennessee, the only 2 teams with over 100 walks in the league. Arkansas with 122, Tennessee with 110, and next is Florida at 95. But I'll tell you what, I'm looking at the series ahead, the rest of the year. I think the one that I'm just most fascinated to see how it'll play out, and part of it's venue, right? Because I think Arkansas is a better team, but Arkansas going on the road to Knoxville where Tennessee, again, is just blistering the ball. It gets out of that park quickly. Even you've seen good pitchers go in Lindsey Nelson Stadium and have fits this year because of that lineup and how fast the ball gets out. But I think you could make a case, Barry, that Arkansas and Tennessee might be the best series remaining. I think Vanderbilt Ole Miss would be one that's up there too. But I think just from a fascinating matchup standpoint, I think Arkansas Tennessee is probably the one that I most look forward to seeing how it turns out.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely up on the top of the list. Vanderbilt at Ole Miss will be electric because Ole Miss has the opportunity to put 14,000 in their stadium every night to get you into the high 30s for attendance, and they will be probably playing for a host, obviously, and playing for a national seed, and that'll be a gigantic series for them that weekend as well. Yeah, the rest of them you don't really look, and maybe Arkansas at home against Florida, but I think the Arkansas at Tennessee and Vanderbilt at Ole Miss are your two best series remaining, and unfortunately they're the same weekend. It could be a lot of fireworks in Knoxville that weekend because both those teams can hit, and both teams have pitched well. It'll be bullpens fairly similar. Arkansas has been able to control the back end of the game. So has Tennessee with the guys that they have, Hundley and Connell, and so they've been able to do that. I think that'll be a really interesting series. And the Vols have had good atmosphere. They had good atmosphere against Vanderbilt. They roughed up Jack Leiter in Game 2. Couldn't get Game 3 and take the series, but they've been really good at home this year, and I do think that'll be that and the Ole Miss hosting Vanderbilt that same weekend will be the two best series left on the schedule.
Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else before we throw it to Blake and get into basketball and football for a minute. I guess not. I did want to ask you, Alabama, Connor Prelip, is he done for the year now?
I would think he is. I mean, nobody said that, but he threw an inning against Auburn. He hadn't pitched again. They didn't pitch him against Kentucky. You thought maybe they'd run him in an inning or two there, especially with all the troubles they had that weekend keeping balls in the park. He didn't pitch against Missouri. Antoine John didn't pitch against Missouri. I don't know that he'd be back either. So I think I would say that at this point, a Connor Prelip sighting on the mound the remainder of the season is not very likely.
We will talk some more baseball later in the week. Barry's going to be joining us more frequently down the stretch here as his schedule's cleared up. I'm going to throw it to Blake. Blake, we got a couple of basketball and football items to get to before we end the show today, so let's go there. I'll just let you start.
Yeah, not much. I don't really, basketball-wise, I don't really know much of – and I mean, Davion Mintz declared for the draft, but at this point I think you just assume, look, everybody has a chance to declare for the draft. I don't really know that a lot of that is necessarily noteworthy because as we always see, there are guys who declare who ultimately come back that you don't expect and vice versa. So I don't know if that's going to mean anything for Kentucky or not, but one of many people who have declared for the draft and will obviously have the option to come back to college if they want to. Football-wise, I know Alabama added a receiver, Jamison Williams from Ohio State. We had nine catches for 154 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. I think he played in 8 games. So just with the one-time transfer rule, as we've said, I mean, it gives players the ability to come in and play right away. So Alabama adds a wide receiver to the mix, and I guess we'll see how he fits in there. So.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we have covered a lot of ground today. We'll have some midweek baseball games to discuss for a minute tomorrow. We'll get into maybe more of the bottom end of the SEC. I know we focused on the top and the teams that could be national seeds, but we got Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, LSU, Auburn, I think suddenly's had an interesting road ahead given what it did last weekend to put itself in shape for Hoover. So we didn't forget all those teams. We just want to spread the content around a little bit. So we'll try to get to the bottom end of the league maybe tomorrow or Thursday and examine the resumes of some of those teams, what they need to do, maybe get into the overall SEC race a bit. But anyway, thank you for listening today. For Blake Lovell and Barry Allen, I'm Chris Lee, the host of the 14. Be sure and tune in to our podcast Wednesday. Be sure and follow us at 14 Southeastern on Twitter, and come to our website, southeastern14.com. We will have power ratings for teams and players coming up later this week. I think that's a fun thing you won't want to miss. But anyway, thank you for listening to the Tuesday episode of the 14. I'll catch you all again very soon.